Once upon a time, there was a reservoir. It was a beautiful reservoir with ducks and geese used to visit, and lots of fish, happy, healthy fish that really enjoyed their time living in the reservoir. And there was fishermen around the reservoir that used to go fishing, and they loved fishing there at the reservoir and sitting there chatting with their friends and having a can at the same time. And those people walked their dogs around the reservoir, and the dogs were always well behaved, and they were all had a great time around the reservoir, and children used to go too. But it was very peaceful too. It was never too crowded or too noisy, and the fish were always enjoying themselves and jumping in and out of the water. But then one day, one of the fish started to feel not very well. Sadly, he was struggling to swim. He took his temperature and he realised he wasn't well, and then some of the other fish also became ill, and then all the fish started to get sick. The suffering was on a scale unimaginable, and this was discovered because one of the people walking around the reservoir found a fish on the bank, and it was sadly dead. And then more fish started washing up dead. People started to panic. So somebody decided to call the council. The council official came down to the reservoir and he looked at the situation. He was concerned and he decided that it was probably best if they closed the reservoir for a while, and to find out what was going on. Some of the older fishermen, the more long-standing fishermen there, didn't want this because they were managing to make some good catches, and they were showing their huge catches of salmon and trout on social media.
Wow. Yeah.
So they mentioned to the council official that there were newer fishermen there, and one of these newer fishermen that they were obviously superior to, they noticed that he must have been killing the fish. The council official found an expert, and there was an expert actually touting for business, and this expert came down to find out what was going on with the fish, and he went down to the reservoir, and he discovered very quickly that this newer fisherman that people didn't like had actually been coming down at night and deliberately overfeeding the fish. He'd been bringing down from his son had a fish tank, and he'd been bringing the food that his son used to feed his fish down to the reservoir, and he'd been taking the fish one by one at night and overfeeding them and making them sick and murdering them. And that's why fish were being found dead, and he'd been doing this for a while. So this man was arrested, and it was sad. He was convicted and sent to prison for fish murder. And the reservoir was at that point allowed to stay open, but because the at the same time the water was changed as a precaution, and new fish were put in the reservoir, brand new fish, and the water was changed. And lo and behold, because the fish murderer had been put in prison, there was no more problems with sick fish dying. And therefore, everyone was happy ever after. And I think this illustrates, for me, it's a sad, sad story. But my first thought when I heard about this tragic problem in the reservoir was that, I heard that when you hear that the fish are dying, my first thought was, well, something must have got in the water. But it seems that from this story, the environment is absolutely irrelevant to the health of fish.